The Mosin Nagant has appeared in countless video games since its introduction to gamers in 2002 with Medal of Honor Allied Assault. Now, even though the rifle has been an iconic weapon of World War II, this rifle has since become a staple in nearly every major World War II game published, and even many non-World War II games. While it has appeared in various Call of Duty and Battlefield titles, it has also popped up in Uncharted, Mafia, Stalker, Metal Gear Solid, Escape from Tarkov, Insurgency, and Ghost Recon, just to name a few. Hey everyone, what's going on? Christopher, the video game historian, here with my first ever Gaming Guns IRL. Now this is a series I've been wanting to do for a little while, and just never got around to producing it until now. And I thought I would start off with one of my favorite rifles that I currently own, the Mosin Nagant M91 30. This specific rifle that I have is from 1943 and was assembled at the Ivs factory in Russia. I purchased her at my local thrift store for around $300, and while it was a little bit more than what I wanted to spend, it was something that I needed to have, and I knew that if I passed her up, I would never see as nice of one in this condition for this price ever again. Now the stock on mine has been refinished, though there is still some wear and tear on the sides, and what makes this one also interesting is the fact that all the serial numbers are matching. Now Mosin Nagants are typically chambered in the 7.62x54mm R cartridge, though some can be found in the 7.62x53mm Rs and 7.92x57mm Mauser calibers. The original M91 rifles had an overall length of 51.34 inches from buttstock to forend, and a hefty weight of around 9 pounds unloaded. In 1930, the rifle would undergo some adjustments, with the rifle being shortened to 48.5 inches with a rounded receiver as opposed to the hexagonal ones found on the original. It has a muzzle velocity of 2,840 feet per second and an effective range of 1,640 feet. It can hold 5 rounds in the magazine, although technically 4 plus 1 in the chamber, and can be fed by stripper clips or individual rounds. Sights are iron with a front post and a rear leaf sight that can be adjusted for distance, going up in increments of 10 meters. The history of this rifle dates back to 1877 to 78, during the Russo-Ottoman War. During the war, the Russians learned a disastrous lesson similar to what the British would learn after the Anglo-Boer War. Single-shot, large-caliber rifles were becoming more and more outdated as technological advancements were making rifles shoot faster and harder. During the Russo-Ottoman War, the Russians were equipped with a .42 caliber Berdan rifle against the Ottomans and their Winchester repeating rifles. Needless to say, things didn't go well for the Russians, who after which began to look into updating their standard issue rifles. They tried to modify the Berdans in 1882, but to no avail. As such, a contest to gun makers was put out for a modern rifle that could meet or exceed the European standards at the time, that could fire a reduced caliber bullet from a smokeless cartridge. Therefore, in 1889, 3 rifles were submitted to the Russian Main Artillery Administration for consideration. One from Captain Sergei Mosin, another by the Nagant brothers, and a third by a Captain Zinoviev. By the end of the testing for these rifles, there was no unanimous decision as to which one should be the one to be adopted, as they all did really well. As a result, it was determined that the best features of all 3 should just be integrated into one, and it was that the Mosin rifle would be the one considered as its base, and upgraded with the follower, interrupter, magazine, and sights from the Nagant rifle, and modified to be allowed to feed via stripper clips. This rifle would be officially designated the 3-line rifle of 1891, otherwise known as the Mosin Nagant M91, and production began right away with the intent of replacing the old Berdan rifles. However, due to production limitations, it would actually take a few decades before they were all replaced. As to why it was called a 3-line rifle, it's actually due to the fact that a line was a unit of measurement at the time that represented 1/10 of an inch, and 3 lines equaled 7.62 or 30 caliber. By 1904, there were about 4 million rifles in production, and the Russians were gearing up for war with Japan. Despite the intent of replacing the Berdans, many soldiers were still sent into battle and issued these outdated rifles, as there just were not enough Mosin Nagants to outfit every single soldier, especially since most of them were issued to the cavalry units. By war's end, the Mosin had seen its first taste of battle, and the Russians also learned on how to improve upon it. The stock would be modified to equip the famous dog collar style sling with the cutout holes. The rounds would be changed, as the original cartridge held a rounded head as opposed to the pointed Spitzer rounds, and even new variants would be created to help better serve in close quarter combat with a 40-inch carbine designated the M1910. When the war broke out in 1914, Russia was extremely underprepared in meeting the demand in order to supply all soldiers with the Mosin Nagant. As such, they looked into companies and nations they already had contracts with to help produce these rifles. Two such companies were from the United States, Remington and the Westinghouse Airbrake Company, which both produced the rifle for Russia for the war. Now Ian McCollum over at Forgotten Weapons can explain more on US produced Mosins, and I highly recommend checking out that video as it's very interesting. Now, along with the M91, the Russian soldiers were also equipped with the Winchester M1895 rifles, along with the Fedorov Automat, Viterli Vitalis, Springfield M1892s, the Arasaka rifles, and yes, even some poor saps had to be outfitted with the Burdens. By World War II, the Mosin Nagant was now the standard issue service rifle of the Soviet forces that saw frontline service throughout the war until 1945. These rifles were wielded by some of the deadliest snipers Russia had to offer, and countless Nazis were killed by these very same rifles. A carbine-length variant would also be produced shortly before the outbreak of the war called the M38 Carbine. It had all the same features as the M9130, with the exception of a length of 40 inches and a more simplified receiver that made it easier for mass production. This variant would also undergo another modification in 1944 that added a folding bayonet to it, and classified as the M44 rifle. By the end of the war, the 54-year service of the Mosin Nagant would come to an end, as it would be replaced by the SKS and AK-47 as the main service rifles of the Soviets, making it the longest running service rifle in the nation's history. All in all, an estimated 37 million were produced since its creation in 1891, and with the Soviets no longer having any use for the rifle after World War II, they were all sold and given away by the millions to countries all over the world, and would still see service in Korea, Vietnam, and even today in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, while there are no more Mosin Nagants being made today, there are still millions in circulation that can be found at various gun shops and thrift stores all across the United States. These can range anywhere between your typical M9130s like mine to Finnish, Czech, Hungarian, Polish, Romanian, or even Chinese copies. For those curious, I have the names of these variants up on the screen, and any one of them will give you the satisfaction of owning and shooting a Mosin Nagant rifle. Now, all these rifles will range in price based on various factors, such as how common the rifle is, the condition of it, if the serial numbers are all matching, among various other factors. If you want a rifle like this, I would check out your local gun shop to see if they have any in stock, or if they know a place that might have them. Gunbroker is also a good place if you don't mind paying a little bit more than retail for some firearms. Now, that's all that I have for this video, and I want to thank everyone for tuning in to my first ever Gaming Guns in Real Life video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. If there's any firearms you would like me to showcase, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see what I can do. I'm also thinking of starting a Patreon solely for this series just to cover the cost of ammo. If I do, news of it will appear on Facebook and Twitter, which you shouldn't forget to follow me on. Anyway, until next time, I'll see you all out on the firing range.